Hi guys, welcome back again for my YouTube video. So for today's video, we will discuss another two articles and I will elaborate further enable to us to know. And to all my viewers and my beloved teacher, attorney Nilda Lavina, ma'am, thank you. So without a further ado, let's start. And now let us discuss the two articles, which is the Article 315 or Swindling or Estafa, and the second is the Article 320, the Destructive Arson. So without further ado, let's start. So now let us discuss the Article 315 or the Swindling or Estafa. Any person who shall defraud another will be considered as committing the estafa. So before I will proceed my main topic, I will explain or define first the swindling or estafa. Swindling or estafa is when you are someone represent as someone who says they can do things they cannot, with such fraud resulting in the victim suffering damage. And now let us talk about the three elements to be consider the person committing estafa or swindling. So it must be present in order to a person will be punished as the crime of estafa or swindling. So first, with unfaithfulness or abuse of confidence, and the second is by means of any of the following false pretense or fraudulent acts executed prior to or stimulously with the commission of the fraud. And the third is fraudulent. So if that three presence of the elements will be considered as the staffa or swindling. So isa-isahin natin ang tatlong elemento upang maintindihan natin ng mabuti. And there are subdivision in every elements. So let's start. And now, let us talk the first element and its subdivision. So the first element with an unfaithfulness or abuse of confidence in the first subdivision by altering the substance, quantity, or quality or anything of a value which the offender shall deliver by virtue of an obligation to do so, even though such obligation be based on an immoral or illegal consideration. The second subdivision is by misappropriating or converting to the procedures of another money, goods, or any other personal property received by the offender in trust or an omission for administration or under any other obligation involving duty to make deliver of or to return the same, even though such obligation be totally or partially granted by a bond, or by denying having received such money, goods, or other property. So the third subdivision is by taking undue advantage of the signature of the offended party in blank, and by writing any document above such signature in blank to the prejudice of the offended party or any third person. And now let us proceed to the next element of the staffa or swindling. False pretenses or fraudulent acts executed prior to or stimulously with the commission of the fraud. So here's the subdivision of the element number 2. By using fictitious name or falsely pretending to possess power, influence, qualification, property, credit, agency, business, or imaginary transaction, or by means of other similar deceit. And so the second subdivision of the second element of stapa, which is by altering the quality, fineness, or wit, or anything pertaining to his act or business. So the third subdivision of the second element of Estafa is by pretending to have bribed any government employee without prejudice to the action for calumny which the offended party may deem proper to bring against the offender. In this case, the offender shall be punished by the maximum of period the penalty. So there's a lot of subdivision on the second element of the crime of Estafa. But tatlo lang ang kinuha ko in order not to further my video presentation. So hope you will be consider this, Ma'am Lavinia. Ma'am. So the three element of the crime Estafa, fraudulent. So here's the subdivision of the third element of crime Estafa. By endorsing another by means of deceit to sign any document. So the second subdivision is by resorting to some fraudulent practice to ensure success in a gambling game. And the third subdivision is by removing, canceling, or destroying in a whole or in a part any court record, office, files, document, or any other paper. And now let us proceed to the penalties of the crime Estafa or Swindling. We are finished discussing the element and its subdivision by elements in number 1, 2, and 3. And now let us proceed to the penalty. And there are 4 considered as penalty of the crime committed Estafa. So first is prison correctional in its maximum period to prison mayor in its minimum period. If the amount of fraud is over 12,000 pesos but does not exceed 22,000 pesos, and if such amount exceed the latter sum, the penalties provided in this paragraph shall be imposed in its maximum period, adding 1 year for each additional 10,000 pesos, but the total penalty which may be imposed shall not exceed 20 years. In such cases, in its connection with the accessory penalties which may be imposed under the provision of this code, the penalty shall be termed prison mayor or reclusion temporal as the case may be. And now the second penalty of the crime Estafa, prison correctional in its minimum and medium periods if the amount of the fraud is over 8,000 pesos but does not exceed 12,000 pesos. And the third penalty of the crime Estafa is arresto mayor in its maximum period to prison correctional in its minimum period if such amount is over 200 pesos but does not exceed in 6,000 pesos. The last is the fourth penalties is by arresto mayor in its maximum period if such amount does not exceed 200 pesos, provided that in the 4 cases mentioned, the fraud be committing by any of the following means. And now let us move on to my next article, which is Article 320 or the destructive arson. So before that, I will define first what is arson. So arson is the act of a crime of willfully, wrongfully, and unjustifiable setting property on a fire, often for the purpose of committing fraud. So in this video, we will show how the person committing a destructive arson and what is the element of each article, which is destructive arson. So without a further ado, let's start. And now let us talk the elements of destructive arson. First, any arsenal, shipyard, storehouse, or military powder or fireworks factory, ordnance, storehouse, archives, or general museum of the government. And now the second element to be considered as committing the destructive arson is any passenger, train, or motor vehicles in motion or vessel out of port. So the last element of committing a crime, destructive arson, is in any inhabitant place, any storehouse or factory, flammable or explosive materials. So in that part of elements, in first, second, third, if the person is present in committing a crime of destructive arson, he or she will be committing a destructive arson. In every committing a crime, there's a penalties. So the penalties of reclusion temporal in its maximum period to reclusion perpetua shall be imposed in any person who shall burn. And that's the three element that I have been said earlier. So that's all and thank you. And I would like to thank my proof attorney Nilda Lavina. Ma'am, thank you for giving this assignment, the article 320, which is the Estafa or Swindling, and the article 20, which is the destructive arson. Thank you and God bless.